Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Pop Dissected podcast. I thought that for this episode, I would continue talking about some things that are more personal to me, since my last podcast in which I described why I made Pop Dissected. So for today's episode, I'm going to be talking about what my 5 favorite albums of all time are. I'm sure a lot of you can probably guess what they may be, but I think there's one in there that may be a surprise to probably all of my viewers. So let's get right into it. And I wanted to say that this is not a specific ranking from my favorite to my least favorite, just a general top 5. So my first favorite album of all time is Katy Perry's Prism. Initially, I was going to put Teenage Dream, since Teenage Dream was the album that got me into mainstream music and developed my passion for music. But I remember when Prism came out, and it came out in a very pivotal point in my life. I had been going to the same school for so many years, and this came out in 2013. I was in 8th grade. I was starting 8th grade at the time, and I had moved across the country. And I was in a brand new city, a brand new town, a brand new school. I think that's hard for anyone, but especially when you go to the same school your entire lifetime and you build over a decade worth of relationships with people, and then those are suddenly not gone, but you're not with those people anymore. I remember when Prism came out, my father took me to Walmart the day before it came out because I thought I got the release date wrong, and they didn't have it, but he took me the next day, and I got the Zine Pack edition, which had stickers and nail art and this seed paper that I actually still have. And it was like a little booklet that had mini interviews with Katy and stuff. And this was back when I bought CDs. I actually still buy CDs. I have CDs of probably most every album that's on my phone. I have an affinity for physical copies of things. Anything I get digitally, I most likely will have physically, whether it's a movie, a box set of a TV show, a video game. There's just something special and nostalgic about having a physical copy, especially in an age where everything is digital. Also, I grew up with Blockbuster, and that was important to my childhood, so I think it started there. But I remember when I listened to Prism, I listened to the entire album all the way through, which I think is the first album that I did that with, and that started that trend for me. I knew the singles at the time. I knew Roar, I knew Dark Horse, Walking on Air, but as I got to the latter half of the record, I found so much importance in the songs that Katy was singing, especially ones like Ghost, By the Grace of God, It Takes Two, Choose Your Battles, This Moment, Love Me. Some really standout tracks in her entire discography that I think have such beautiful, empowering messages that I think are so important. I struggled a lot throughout my 8th grade year, with friendships and confidence and a whole bunch of other things. It's middle school. It sucks, And I think that record probably couldn't have come out at a better time because it really, even though I still struggled and it was really, really difficult for me, I still found a way to be resilient and still found a way to carry on. And for me, Prism is an album I will always turn to when I'm feeling low or I'm down in the dumps and I need some sort of guidance. Those songs they're implanted in my mind, and a lot of the lyrics in some of those songs, especially the track Love Me, are my mantras. I think about them every day. One of my biggest takeaways from the record Prism is how it really has an essence of self-love and empowerment. And I think this record further cemented my love for Katy Perry, my attachment to her, because, I think she writes such strong empowerment anthems. And, she's talked about how when she puts out these songs and albums that, are positive and have positive affirming messages, she herself is going through it. She's in the thick of depression or something really bad, and she writes these songs to get herself out of it. So I think it only makes sense that someone who's listening to that would be in the same position. When you're feeling low, you turn to something that will uplift you. So because of that, I think Prism is definitely one of my favorite records. I also saw the tour twice. I saw it once in Connecticut, where I was in the Reflection Section pit, which was really awesome. And then I saw her again in Boston, and I was on the floor. I was probably 10th row maybe, which was really, really cool. That era will always be very special to me because it was a very big changing point in my life. 8th grade. I was 14, I think, about to start high school. I think that's a big change for a lot of people. And I'll always remember how that record inspired me to keep going and be strong, and it's something I'm very, very grateful for. So for my next favorite record, I would say Like a Virgin by Madonna. This is actually a rather new development. I actually had started listening to Madonna when Rebel Heart came out, because she had that song called Illuminati, and I just thought that was so interesting. I was like, ooh, Illuminati, you mean like triangles and eyes and witchcraft and all that stuff? Completely misunderstanding what the Illuminati was, but this was during the time where people would upload videos of pop stars, songs reversed, and would say there were satanic messages in them, so I gravitated towards it. But I didn't really pay attention to Madonna after that. I was just like, oh, this is a fine record. And this was about the spring of 2019. I just randomly one day decided to listen to Madonna. And I started with Like a Virgin. And I remember just being so wowed. Because, you hear about Madonna. Oh, she's the queen of pop. She did this and that. She has a huge legacy, a big impact, influence, all the talking points. But actually listening to her music was something so cool for me, because I was like, wow, like this is, for me anyway, because my music catalog is kind of limited. It's very narrow. So this was like discovering something completely brand new for me. I think Like a Virgin for me is tied with True Blue and Like a Prayer. I love all three of those records equally, honestly. But Like a Virgin was the first Madonna experience I fully had, and I think there's some really fun songs on there. I love the song Over and Over. As I've stated, I love empowerment anthems. I think it's a great one. Pretender is another really good song. I remember when I first heard it, there was stuff going on in my personal life, so I really related to that song. You have the classics Like a Virgin, Material Girl, and Material Girl. Oh my god, that is a great song, and no one can convince me otherwise. I think for me, Like a Virgin just really has more of a personal enjoyment to it. It's not necessarily because the record, when I discovered it, was during anything major or specific in my life. It just really opened a new window to a new style of music. And yes, it's pop music, but it was 1984, I think, when that album came out. I love a lot of things from the 80s, a lot of 80s television, a lot of 80s film, a lot of 80s music. So it's an album that when I listen to it, I just think, wow, what would it have been like to be a teenager during that time and growing up, experiencing Madonna coming out with brand new music and being this new icon and controversial role model for people? I think it's really interesting to think about. So for my third record, I think this will be the one that surprises a lot of people, because I don't really talk about this artist. I don't think I ever have. But for my third record, it would be the Marshall Mathers LP by Eminem, which came out in 2001, I believe, maybe 2002. This was similar in discovery to Madonna. Before I listened to this record fully, I remember something just made me look up Eminem, and I was reading his controversies, and I knew okay, he's a controversial figure, I'm not going to listen to his music. I know what it's about. I'm not going to get into all of that. And then one day, this was late 2019, so that the same year that I started listening to Madonna, I just put on his first album and I just listened to them all the way through. Every single one he had released up until that point. And of course, for me, I really only listened to pop music, so this was like a discovery for me. I was like, whoa, this type of music exists? And one thing I found interesting is, yes, the content is graphic, and yes, it's explicit, it's intense. It's definitely not for every kind of listener, which is why so many people I know at least, were shocked when they found out I liked Eminem. They're like, you listen to Katy Perry and Taylor Swift. What do you mean you like Eminem? One thing that Eminem has described, I think it was specifically with the Marshall Mathers LP, is he compared it to a horror movie. He talked about how there's fictional stories that are meant to shock and be, violent and disturbing, and we see that in media all the time. And he wanted to translate that into music and kind of tell fictional stories that did have basis in reality but were over-exaggerated, over the top, crazy. And I never knew that was really an approach to making music or even songwriting. So I thought that was really compelling that that's how he was inspired to create his music. And, I think that he has very interesting messages and themes across his entire discography. But because this is the record that made me discover him and the type of music he makes and his intention with his music, as well as his own life story, which I think is very interesting to read about, I would have to say Marshall Mathers LP ranks as one of my favorite top 5 records. So for my 4th record, bringing it back to pop music, would be Let Go by Avril Lavigne. Now, the first Avril Lavigne record I think I heard was Goodbye Lullaby, and then I got into her self-titled, and then I worked my way backwards through her discography. But Let Go is always my go-to when I want to listen to Avril Lavigne. I think that, as I stated before in regards to Madonna, I would have loved to experience what it would have been like to be a teenager when Avril Lavigne was putting out her first several albums. She really speaks to such a universal experience as a teenager, and I think for myself as a young adult, I can still relate to. And I think people can still relate to this anyway, no matter what their age is. She speaks about heartbreak. She talks about getting lost in her daydream. She's angsty, she's flustered, she's frustrated, she's in love. Kind of makes me think like, okay, what if the album was called Complicated instead? Because she's expressing all these complicated emotions that are conflicting throughout the entire album, and I think people can relate to that. It really offers such a form of catharsis, I think, for me. Songs like Complicated, someone is acting one way around me, but I see them in a group setting and they are completely different. Why is that? Or I'm With You, where you're just lonely and you're just wanting someone, and you don't, in that moment, you don't care who that is. You just want to be connected with someone. My favorite song on the album is My World. I think that one is so fun. To me, the chorus sounds like the intro to like a mid-2000s sitcom. I can just hear it. I can picture like characters or whatever and like all their names popping up at the bottom of the screen. It's just really fun and has such a timeless sound. I think that's the great thing about Let Go, is that it balances, fun, youthful bliss with youthful anger and heartbreak. And I think Avril Lavigne did such a great job. So it makes sense that that record, the album, has sold so many copies worldwide. I mean, as it should. And on to my final album that is in my top 5, Taylor Swift's Reputation. I feel like y'all should have saw this coming. I've made, 3 videos on this album. It's why I started my YouTube channel. But this album, I don't want to say it's my favorite album to exist, but I would honestly say if I had to rank the albums I listed, it would be top 3, maybe even top 2. The first thing is I'm so fascinated by the concept of the record. How Taylor Swift took the ammunition that was shot at her and she fired it right back. Through cleverly woven metaphors and allusions and Easter eggs and visual symbolism. I mean, you hear these songs and you watch these music videos and you know the context behind everything that's happened, and it's like, it is brilliant. It really, really is. Also, I think a lot of us have been in situations where we've been portrayed one way by others, and we know that's not who we are, and this album can offer some sort of catharsis to be like, hey, I'm going to reclaim my narrative. I know who I am. I know what I've done. I know what I've said. And I'm not going to allow any other person to say I did this or say this is the kind of person I am or take my words out of context. I'm going to own my identity. And you know what? If you say this is what I am, then I'll be exactly that. Which I think is so interesting because you basically beat the other person to the punchline. It's not funny anymore. They have no power over you because you've taken what they've said about you or what they've done to you, and you have reclaimed that. Now, I wouldn't advise that for every situation. I think every situation is different, but I think in this instance, in an artistic way, it definitely worked. It's really an album I put on to feel really, really confident. Like, I feel like a badass when I listen to this album. At the end of the day, the album is about finding love throughout all the noise, and I think that's another important aspect to me, because I think about my own life and things I've been through, things I've experienced, things that are hard for me, things that are pressing constantly, things I struggle with in my mind, things other people say, the whole lot of it. And I know that personally I have that love in my life that I can look to for guidance or security or a way to make me feel better. Like, it's not impossible, even when it does feel like, oh my God, I can't manage this kind of stuff anymore. And that's not saying your validity or your entire existence should be placed in a partner or someone you love or a friend or a family member. But it's nice to know you have that someone you can rely on. And through everything that's going on, through all the drama, through all the there is still someone who is there at the end of the day and doesn't care about what has been said about you or what you may have done, if you've lashed out. You have that person on the other side of the bed at the end of the night. And I think that's really beautiful. So yeah, those are my top 5 favorite albums. I would love to hear what all of yours are down in the comments below, and we can talk about them. Also, I'd like to know if you have any thoughts on the albums that I listed. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. I'll see you in the next podcast.